All right, guys. So Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in human history, who also happens to be our current unelected CEO dictator of sorts, is continuing to illegally and unconstitutionally take a sledgehammer to the U.S. federal government. Now, specifically in this video, I want to focus on the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that was established in the aftermath of the '08 financial crash, and basically their sole purpose is to return money to Americans who have been defrauded or scammed by multi-billion-dollar financial institutions. That's their purpose. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about waste, fraud, and abuse here. They're not going after the Pentagon, but they are going after the CFPB that costs, on average, around less than $1 billion a year, tiny fraction of what the Pentagon costs, for example. And they've also returned upwards of over $20 billion to defrauded and scammed Americans throughout the years, on top of acting as a watchdog and as a deterrent for potential scams and frauds. So that's the agency that we're talking about here. And we're going to get into a little bit more of the background of Elon Musk and his direct conflict of interest that he has with this agency. But this is the latest news here from Philip Wegman, because on Saturday, there was an email that was obtained by Real Clear Politics where the acting CFPB director, Russ Vought, who, by the way, is deeply tied into Project 2025. Remember when Trump pretended like he didn't know what that was, and then he proceeded to staff his administration with people deeply tied into Project 2025? But Russ Vought directed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau basically not to do anything. So here was the list that he put together in this memo. He says, the Bureau shall not approve or issue any proposed or final rules or formal or informal guidance. They will suspend the effective dates of all final rules that have been issued or published but have not yet become effective. They will not take additional investigative activities related to or settle enforcement actions. They will not open any new investigation in any manner and will cease all pending investigations. They will not issue public communications of any type, including publication of research papers and compliance bulletins, and it goes on and it goes on. So essentially what they've done here is completely shut down one of the only real watchdog agencies for financial institutions here in the US. Now, again, getting into a little bit more of the conflicts of interest in the background here, we have this report here from Politico. Elon Musk tweeted this, CFPB RIP. CFPB RIP. Elon Musk is already descending on his next target, which of course is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, if you go and you look at the replies to his tweet, CFPB RIP, you had even some big Elon fans, some Trump fans, some MAGA type people who were responding to him, and they're like, listen, I'm all for you going after waste, fraud, and abuse or whatever, but this is like one of the only good agencies that's actually doing something for the American people. Like, why are you targeting this? Again, we'll get more into that here as we go on. We have this report from Matt Stoller, the big newsletter. Great read if you guys aren't subscribed to it, but he breaks down a little bit more of the background here. So he says we can now expect, as a consequence of the shutting down of CFPB, rampant fraud and cheating in banking and fintech, not just a scam here or there, but regular losses of life savings by people who followed the rules, illegal foreclosures, random seizures of the working capital of small businesses, abuse by debt collectors, and routine deception by even respected financial firms. And behind that, we could see big tech, either Google, Meta, Amazon, or perhaps X or Twitter, serving as your credit card, payroll provider, and debt collector all in one. He says, let's start with some of the small stuff that will now change. So this is some of what the CFPB has done. Rules against excessive overdraft fees, gone. A rule capping credit card late fees, gone. Oversight of debt collectors and payday lenders, no more. An honest site to compare credit card products, gone. In 2023, the CFPB said that big banks can't charge junk fees for basic customer service, like being able to check the amount of money in your account. The reason isn't just that it's nice, but that big banks themselves were unable to offer basic information, like who owned mortgages prior to 2008. That's gone too. Another rule put forward recently is that mortgage servicers can't garner excessive fees when they foreclose, which is an incentive to foreclose rather than working out loans. No longer. So if you think that this isn't going to have a direct impact on your life, those are the myriad of different ways that it potentially might. And hard to Hard to wrap your mind around how that wouldn't impact every single American at this point. Now, again, in terms of the Elon Musk connection here, we have this tweet from Li Fang, who said that closing CFPB means rapidly accelerating the shift to app-based financial platforms with zero consumer protections, no FDIC insurance, no promises that your money won't be used to speculate on crypto like SBF, etc. Horrible idea that only empowers predators from the tech industry. So this is where we get to Elon Musk, guys. Elon recently worked out a deal with Visa, and he has been trying to do this for a long time, to turn Twitter, or X, into the quote, like everything app, right? So he wants you to be able to do, whatever, whether it's calling an Uber type vehicle, or whether it's, storing your money there, or whatever the case may be. He wants X to be the quote unquote everything app. Now, the CFPB was trying to treat companies like that, who are essentially acting as like payment servicers, or essentially acting as some form of a bank. The CFPB was trying to regulate them as banks, as payment servicers, right? Elon doesn't like that. These fintech companies, they don't like that. Essentially, they want to function as banks without being regulated as banks. And so this is a core reason why somebody like Elon Musk has a direct financial and legal conflict of interest in terms of getting rid of the CFPB, to push them out of the way so that he can push forward with this kind of a plan, with, again, none of the real regulations that actual banks have, so that if you get screwed over by some of these companies and you lose all of your money, there is no recourse because you no longer have a functioning CFPB. This is the kind of conflict of interest that is just, it's so corrupt, it's so brazen, it's so staring you in the face that it's fucking insulting that anybody would believe that this is actually about going after waste, fraud, and abuse, right? Now, we also have this here from David Sirota. Again, some more background on that. Elon Musk's sudden renewed push to kill the CFPB came 10 days after his social media company cut a deal with Visa to go into a scandal-plagued payment business the agency had been trying to regulate and to make sure Americans' money isn't stolen. Now, we also had some amazing tweets here from people who are involved in this same industry, crypto and fintech and all of that, who are kind of like saying the quiet part out loud and admitting that their businesses rely on some form of fraud to exist, and that's why they don't like the CFPB. So here we had Brian Armstrong of Coinbase here, who says the CFPB is unconstitutional on the face of it, and even if it wasn't, it should be deleted. I like how they use this like tech language, right? It should be deleted as we already have a DOJ to prosecute fraud and many other financial service regulators. It's an activist organization that has done enormous harm to the country. Again, we're talking about an agency that's one of the few government agencies that actually returns more money than it costs to operate, right? And I don't even believe that like government agencies inherently should be run in that type of way. Sometimes you just want to provide a social service and it's not going to have some sort of a direct financial payout. This is one of those agencies that actually does have that. Again, costs like less than $1 billion to operate and has returned over $20 billion, as well as deterring billions and billions more on top of that throughout the years. Now, he says it's unconstitutional, as pointed out here, helpfully, I guess, on X. Some readers added some community notes here, and they say the Supreme Court ruled in a 7-2 decision that CFPB's funding mechanism does not violate the Constitution. Justice Thomas wrote the majority opinion, stating that the CFPB's funding fits within the framework of congressional appropriations. So he's just wrong in terms of it being unconstitutional. But again, what are you admitting by saying this? Representative here from Coinbase, a crypto firm, right? Well, you're saying this is a great way to announce that your company relies, again, on several forms of fraud to generate revenue. So again, they're kind of just saying the quiet part out loud here. They're saying we don't want the CFPB to exist because they're preventing us from defrauding and scamming people. I mean, we also had another one here. Here is pointed out by Matt Binder. He says, Elon Musk killing the CFPB isn't to help you, it is to help his rich tech buddies scam you. Look at what his buddy Austin here said just a few days ago. The government didn't unfairly come after Austin. The CFPB found that Austin and his company were deceiving people. So here we had Austin who said, I was doing that until the politicians tried to kill my company and bankrupt my family. He's talking about the CFPB coming after him. Elon Musk replies to that saying, Fair. And then you look a little bit more into the background here in terms of what the CFPB was coming after him for, his company Bloom Tech. Well, they hid the cost and true nature of students' debt. They tricked prospective students with inflated job placement rates. They misrepresented their financial interests by selling loans to investors, and they engaged in illegal contract practices. So again, perfect example here. The CFPB is actually doing their job. They're protecting average working class Americans from scam artists, and then now those scam artists are coming out of the woodwork and they're saying, yes, please, let's get rid of the CFPB because they tried to hurt my family or whatever the fuck. I mean, again, it's all very transparent, guys. Now, we also had this update here, as pointed out by Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, where she says, this is outrageous. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's rule to ban medical debt from credit reports would have removed $50 billion in medical debt and helped nearly 15 million Americans. And now the Trump administration is once again siding with the rich and powerful over working people. And the headline here is that the CFPB has agreed to temporarily halt their medical debt rule. So again, CFPB does something that's good for average Americans, right? They say, let's remove medical debt, something that you have absolutely no control over if you get sick or injured. And they're saying, let's remove that from your medical, from your credit reports. And here comes the Trump administration saying, no, we actually disagree with that. We actually think that that should harm your credit reports if you happen to get sick or injured and you're ripped off by health insurance companies here in the US, because we also have a for-profit health insurance system as well. Does this sound like a president who is, a populist, right? This infamous right-wing populist movement here? Does this sound like he's standing up for average working class Americans, or does this sound like he's selling you out to big tech, to the health insurance companies, to the wealthy, to the rich, to the powerful, to the elite? This is what serving the establishment looks like. This is not taking on the establishment. This is not going after the deep state and the elites and whatever else the case may be. It's the opposite of that. Now, we also had some updates here because some judges are stepping into the woodworks and they're at least temporarily trying to restrict what Elon Musk is doing. Because keep in mind, it's not just that he's unconstitutionally trying to get rid of funding mechanisms that Congress had already appropriated, which is totally unconstitutional, but he's also putting a risk out there for personal information, for data that him and his Doge team have hacked into in the Treasury and all of these other agencies. So we have this here from Politico. Judge orders sweeping restriction on Doge access to sensitive Treasury payment systems. Now, I don't know how this is going to end up playing out in the courts. I mean, this happened on Saturday. This is going to play out over the next week or couple weeks or however long it's going to take. But we also have at the same time, as some of these judges, as some of these Democratic attorney generals are trying to push through the legal system to challenge what Elon Musk is doing, we also have Elon and Trump, who we'll get to here in a second, just sort of like attacking, smearing these judges and lashing out at them and saying they're just not going to listen to them, right? I mean, here we have a headline from CNBC. Musk calls to impeach the judge who ordered to block Doge from the Treasury system access. So he's saying we should impeach them, right? We should just get rid of the judges who make decisions that we don't like. And then we also had Trump here, who was asked on Fox News in this interview with Brett Baer. He said, the court said that there is a risk of irreparable harm. Does that slow you down in what you want to do? And Trump said, no, I disagree with it 100%. So at this point, guys, like beyond just Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire, hijacking the federal government and illegally and unconstitutionally shutting down payments and doing all of the rest of this, on top of that, we also have another sort of like constitutional crisis that's playing out here, which is that the Trump administration seems like they're just going to straight up ignore the judicial branch entirely. Like, what happens if we just don't listen to court orders that are telling us that what we're doing is illegal and unconstitutional? Then what? I mean, people have been bringing up this old J.D. Vance tweet from a while back where he was quoting what I think is a false quote from Andrew Jackson, where he basically says, like, the judge has made their ruling, now, like, let them enforce it with their army. Obviously implying that the judge doesn't have an army. They have no real mechanism to enforcement if the president just completely ignores it, right? What are you going to do? You're going to arrest me? So then we just sort of have a standoff where it's like simultaneously the Trump administration is taking away the power of the purse from Congress, and then is also completely ignoring the judicial branch and trying to consolidate power into the hands of the executive. That's a complete constitutional crisis that kind of breaks down the entire foundation of what our government's system is supposed to look like. Then what, right? And again, as a reminder, in terms of the conflicts of interest, I brought up this graph so many different times, but it's really useful here from the New York Times. The extent of the conflicts of interest with Elon are just absurd. And keep in mind, Trump was asked about this, and he's like, well, if there's a potential conflict, then we'll look into it. And like we'll make sure that doesn't happen. And then later on, Trump's White House press secretary came out and said, Elon will get to determine whether or not there's a potential conflict of interest. Guys, there is a conflict of interest with Elon Musk in literally every single government agency that he is putting his hands on right now. I mean, in terms of the federal contracts, by the way, I'm sure that Elon is going to go after the waste, fraud, and abuse in terms of the money that his companies get to the tune of billions of dollars from the federal government. Of course, he's not going to do that. But every single government agency, I mean, in terms of the federal contracts, we have Department of Energy, Department of State, Commerce, Veterans Affairs, the Interior, Homeland Security, Agriculture, Transportation, the Defense Department, of which he's one of the largest contractors, the GSA, the EPA, NASA. And then in terms of his legal troubles, investigations, and oversight mechanisms, where his companies have been looked into for various, violations of the law, we have the Department of Transportation, the Justice Department, the Labor Department, the Department of the Interior, Agriculture, the NLRB that they've also completely shut down at this point, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EPA, Security and Exchange Commission, the FCC, the Federal Trade Commission. So the extent of the conflicts of interest don't end anywhere, right? This guy, Elon Musk, shouldn't be anywhere near the mechanisms of the federal government, let alone having intimate access with widespread personal data, with no transparency as to what him and his Doge team of like 20-something-year-olds are actually doing. I mean, this is just completely insane. This is a hostile billionaire taking over the federal government with no oversight whatsoever and just completely illegally and unconstitutionally shutting shit down on a whim. Again, with direct conflicts of interest in the agencies that he is attacking. Now, to finish off here, I guess the final question is like, well, what are Democrats doing about this, right? How are they pushing back? Well, here we have a couple examples from the Democratic leadership. We have Hakeem Jeffries, who is, I guess, getting on his hands and knees and groveling in front of big tech oligarchs, going to Silicon Valley, apparently, 150 plus donors that he met with last week, stepping in with pissed off donors. And they say, quote, his singular focus was how do we ensure Silicon Valley remains with Dems? Because right now, Silicon Valley is feeling very purple. So the lesson apparently that Democratic leadership has taken from the current situation is not, hey, maybe we should reject billionaire and oligarchical control over our political system, but it's instead, how can we win back the billionaire class? That's the lesson that they're taking from this. How can we get them back on our side? And remember, I showed you guys that Ken Martin clip, the guy who was just recently nominated to be the new head of the DNC chair. And he had a clip where he was saying, he was asked about billionaire influence in politics. And he said, well, we're only going to take money from the good billionaires, not the bad ones. The good ones being the ones that give us money. And it's just a fucking joke at this point, guys. This is the pushback. This is the lesson that you guys have learned over the last year or so, over the last 10 years during the Trump era. This is what you guys have learned. Not that we need to engage in an anti-war, anti-billionaire sort of economic populist pitch and to stop taking corporate PAC money to regulate money in politics. But it's instead to, hey, maybe we should grovel more at the feet of the billionaire class. Try to win them back to our side. I mean, it's not very hopeful. We also had him, essentially just completely folding. The quote here from Ken, as he points out here, is, what leverage do we have? They, meaning Republicans, control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. So why the fuck do you even want this job? Other than just maintaining the status quo, which obviously isn't working out, to say the least, for average Americans. Why do you even work in politics? If when the other party is in power, you just throw your hands up and you're like, oh, I guess there's nothing we can do. And it's also deeply ironic that whenever Democrats are in power, Even during the Biden administration, the Obama administration, when they had somewhat of a trifecta control, even when they are in power in the presidency, the House, the Senate, Republicans are still an impossible obstacle that they can't seem to get over. But then when Republicans have the same thing, Democrats throw their hands up and they say, well, what can we possibly do to block it? I mean, step one, again, outside of using the internal, like, institutional mechanisms that you have at your disposal to try to gum up the works here, step one is forming a coherent narrative to turn the American people against Donald Trump, against Elon Musk, to frame him as he is, which is somebody who is doing the bidding corruptly of the billionaire class, of wealthy corporations. That's what the Trump administration is. It's as easy as you could possibly imagine to frame them in that light because it's true. Because he stacked his administration with donors and with corporate lobbyists and with billionaires and millionaires. He's ripping apart federal agencies that have the mechanisms of protecting average Americans against scams and frauds and abuses of those corporations and billionaires. That's who he serves. He is the elite of all elites. But somehow you guys are losing the messaging war on that front. How is that even possible? How is that even possible? And again, the difficult part for Democrats is that at the end of the day, they also take that PAC money. They take that corporate money. They're being lobbied by the same fucking people. And they can't get over that. They can't get past that and engage in an actual grassroots, bottom-up movement. And so because they can't do that, they can't break away from that, they're not going to be able to adequately push back or even form a coherent narrative to push back against Trump, to push back against Elon Musk. It is all so beyond pathetic, and it's all beyond like 5-alarm fire at this point, that it's like I almost don't even know what to say about it. We have an unelected billionaire, the richest man in human history, who is illegally and unconstitutionally hijacking our federal government agencies and just shutting shit down on a whim that he personally doesn't like in order to personally benefit him financially and legally alongside his other billionaire buddies. Guys, this is not a democracy. It wasn't before, arguably, before the Elon Musk and Trump administration came into power this time. It wasn't before. We already had the issues of campaign finance and the rest of it, and the wealth accumulation. But it's gotten to a point where it's so brazen, it's so in your face, that it's insulting to pretend like this is even still a functioning government apparatus. So figure your shit out. Come up with a plan. Fight back. Do something, man.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying